is my journey. I grew up in India. So I went to undergrad school in India itself, St. Stephen's College, Delhi. And after that, I worked for 2 years. I started my career with Hewitt Associates, an HR consulting firm. And after doing it for a while, that was a time where there was this whole .com buzz. So I did a tech.com startup for a while till the .com bubble burst, and then I went to B school. My B school was in India as well, the IIM Bangalore. When I was in B school at that stage, half the B school in terms of just aspiration wanted to get into consulting, and the other half wanted to get into iBanking. I know today there's entrepreneurship and other things, but that time these were the two buckets. And for me, consulting sounded a little cooler because I'd done a little bit of consulting earlier, and I had the idea of working, again, all the myths that Shiv talked about, idea of working with across businesses, variety appealed to me. And if I really think about why I wanted consulting, it was to do with that and to be part of this exclusive club. At every stage you want to get into a better uni and a better MBA program, and each stage is a club. So this is that exclusive club that you get into where I made it in life. And to be honest, that was one of the reasons why I actually wanted to get into consulting. So anyway, I looked at consulting as a career when I was in B school, and at that stage I applied to BCG, made it to the last round, but unfortunately I didn't make it. So I joined P&G, and that's when I moved to Singapore 12 years back. So I joined P&G in consumer marketing. That was a regional role based out of Singapore for the Southeast Asia region. When I look back at my career in P&G, and I think two things really stood out. Firstly, I think it was a great foundation for the principles of marketing. They're really, really good in instilling those principles. So my 3 years there, I learned a lot about marketing depth. Secondly, I think P&G gives you a good opportunity at starting levels to do leadership roles. In year one, you're running projects across geographies, across functions, and you're the guy who's kind of running it. So that leadership experience is really good. So that's what I got out of P&G. And then after spending close to 3 years in P&G, I was looking at something more stimulating. And this whole consulting bug was always at the back of my mind. I really wanted to do it. And that's why I kind of applied to BCG. Unfortunately, I got into BCG. When I look at BCG, just in terms of going into the BCG office versus P&G, the first thing you kind of hits you is, there are a lot smarter people in the way we look at them. In P&G there's diversity and people bring in different levels of smartness, but then when I look at, intellectually smart people, Ivy League B schools, in fact, Emily was in BCG when I kind of joined. So people like Emily from Wharton, from Ivy League schools are there. So that's the first thing that kind of hits you. And then, as you get into BCG, I thought, let me talk about 3-4 stories of what my experience was like, which will give you a little sense of consulting. First case I was doing, I needed to do some analysis. So for that, I needed to travel to India. It was an India-based case, but working out of Singapore. So I did that for 2-3 weeks, figured out everything that needed to be figured out, had some recommendations, came back to my partner 2 days before the big meeting, which they call the SteerCom, the steering committee meeting. And I explained to him, this is how I'm thinking about it. I had a Word doc, had everything in place. And he said, great, where are the slides? I said, yeah, just do it like 2 days, no problem. And his expression was, wow, you haven't got any slides in place. And the next 2 nights, getting help from everyone else, working late at night, I understood what he meant. Actually making slides, at least for me, when you join a consulting firm, is extremely difficult. You have those thoughts, but how do I kind of tell that story in different slides? What are the graphs that I use? It's really, really intimidating, and you don't know how to do it. Over a period of time, that works well, but that takes some way to get. Takes some effort to do. Especially in other companies who are doing Word documents. As you start working in BCG, at least based on my experience, it's a lot of, I want to share this idea with you, here are 5 slides. You think in terms of slides, because whatever a client sees are slides. The final deck that you actually give the client for $1 million are a set of slides, there's nothing else. So it's all about slides. That was my first realization. The second thing was quite interesting, in the same project, new consultant, the practice leader asked me that, all right, before you get into this analysis, let's talk about how you're thinking about it, and then let's align on your thought process, and then you can go deeper. So share some rough numbers with me. So I said, great. I spent some time on my Excel sheet, did some rough numbers, and I went to him. And for the next 30 minutes, he spat all over me, dude, what the hell is this? And this is not right, and that's not right. And I said, wow, he asked me for some rough numbers and I, put some rough thoughts out there. The guy after me was a 4-year consultant. And then I saw his sheet and I realized what went wrong. His sheet was perfectly formatted. The column widths were different, there was borders around it, grid lines were hidden. It was more like this was something he could present to the client. And those were what were referred to as rough numbers. So, it's a lot about, and I've seen that in consulting as well. You tell a client that, I want to share some top line thoughts, which means you have a 30-slide deck with everything already worked out. So it's a lot about over-preparing and under-promising, even internally, which was the other thing that kind of stood out for me in consulting. The third thing was, sometimes this might happen to you. In my analysis, I made a mistake. I discussed it with my practice leader. I didn't know at the time I made the mistake, and it was all good. We were presenting to the client. The client happened to be ex-BCG, so he was very sharp as well. And he picked my mistake. And it was, one of those situations where he says, with that assumption, and damn. And then he goes, that means this and this and this. And you see it all coming because he had you at hello. At that assumption, he already had you and you knew you'd made the mistake. So those things happen. What I took out of it was, in consulting, at least in my experience, you have a project where you have a practice leader and different people who do different modules. Each module is something you control. And you might, share it with your practice leader, get his inputs, but very often he will not have the time to go into the details. So the level of checking, the level of thoroughness needs to come from you. When I compare that to other jobs, there are opportunities to make mistakes that kind of, get caught at different levels and it's not that serious. In consulting, it may sometimes get caught by the client, which is unacceptable. So thoroughness is extremely important, at least for me. That's what I took out in consulting. The last story, and this was my last case in consulting, where we were working for Nokia and we did, this was for our sales force effectiveness. So we did some phase, this was Middle East, Africa. So I did the initial phase in Dubai. In fact, I was working with Ramiz, who has disappeared. Okay, who's there? Anyway. So the first phase was in Dubai, and the second phase was in South Africa, where we needed to go and execute with the third-party sales force of a company and get them into the best-in-class practices. And as I was working with them, I realized these guys, it takes so much time to get something to them. They don't understand. It's difficult to do. And then as I was working more with them, I got a better sense of their numbers. And then I realized that, the guy running this is actually making more money than a partner, way more money than a partner. And if I think about stuff, he didn't go to an Ivy League B school. I don't think he graduated. I don't think he works half as hard as the partner. And in our way of looking at life, at least my way, I don't think he's half as intelligent as most partners in structured thought process. And he's making a hell of a lot more than partners. What did I get wrong? Where did I get this wrong? So that, again, and he works in a completely non-glamorous, under the hood sort of industry and doing exceedingly well. So I quit BCG after that, and these two were not related. Yeah, right. They were actually not related. And to be honest, the reason why I quit was, as I looked at partners, senior, they worked really hard, and the amount of effort they put in, for me, it was a lifestyle choice. I didn't think I could actually put in that effort, and that was the actual reason of quitting. So anyway, I quit, and then I started my own company. I've been running this for 8 years. This is a marketing communications company. We do digital and retail work with consumer good clients. P&G is my biggest client, so leveraging a little bit on network. What consulting taught me for entrepreneurship, for me, very honestly, so this is like a traditional entrepreneurship. Very honestly, very little. I had to unlearn a lot, because in consulting, it's a very structured thought process. In entrepreneurship, you have to go with the gut. In consulting, you need to look at data from different angles to make sure it's all right. In at least in this entrepreneurship, you just need to go with your gut and make a call. And if a consultant was to look at my business model, he'd be really disappointed, because when you're actually starting a business, you cannot be, idealistic. It's we call ourselves, like I said, retail and digital, but if somebody wants us to do videos, we'll do that. If somebody wants us to buy samples, we'll do that. So, you do whatever you can get and make it happen to reach a certain size. So, at least the way I look at it, you make it a $100 million business at some stage. And then a consultant can help you take it to 1 billion. But making the first million, at least from a consulting standpoint, I don't think you get the skills. The only thing actually that worked was similar to what Emily said. You know, once you're part of BCG, there's a lot of credibility because of which people take you seriously and it's easier to get work. Overall, the way I look at consulting, you know, soccer, Philip Lahm, for me, will make a far better consultant than NUS. You know, because Philip Lahm is the guy who will be 100% every day. He'll give you consistency, reliability. He's going to do everything for you. Lionel Messi might be brilliant on certain days, but he may be off on certain days. So it's not, at least for me, that real brilliance and intellectual, you know, really sharp guy. If you're slightly above average, and like all of you are, willing to work hard, give it 100% every day, I think you'll make a good consultant. That's it. Thank you.